We know that the back half of the year is pretty full of heavy hitters for Nintendo Switch, but when we look back at the first half, the retrospective eye is not as happy. And while there were many games that were quite loved and even sold very, very well, our personal opinion is that the Q1 and Q2 games didn't quite live up to the hype and the expectations.
Absolutely, Zach. If we look at sheer numbers, there were a lot of releases in the first half of the year. And we're not saying that they were bad games by any chance. I know a lot of them we both really enjoyed. But for the bigger Nintendo first-party stuff, I know for some of them, you and I didn't spend as much time with them as we had hoped. And maybe the hype was a little too high, I would say.
Yeah, I think when we were discussing and looking back at some of our playtime, we would have thought we would have put more time into some of these titles, and a lot of that has to do with the heavy emphasis on ports and the fact that for us, and maybe some of you, we already played these games, and so pre-release we were very excited to experience them on Switch and see them on Switch, and then post-release they fell off pretty fast, and it ended up being some of the smaller titles that occupied our Switch time, things like Celeste and Mega Man Legacy Collection, Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection for you, Gabe. I do wonder if there is a bit of that sort of clouding that, hey, it's super great to have this on Switch and we want everything on Switch, but that idea maybe is wearing a bit thin.
Yeah, that's totally possible, right? It's by all accounts still, it's the newest platform. I don't know if I want to call it a new platform anymore just because it's been out for quite some time, but maybe that new toy effect is starting to go away a little bit, and now we're just hoping that the games are good. And again, so many of these are so good. One that I wanted to touch on specifically, Zach, it came out very early in the year, Kirby Star Allies. We both played the demo. We both played some of the full game as well, but I don't think it grabbed either of us. And, in return, you didn't see very much of it on the channel. But I think that was the first big one that I remember being very excited for. And then when I played it, it just didn't grab me the way I wanted it to.
Yeah, and Kirby obviously is a brand new title, so we were extra excited for that. And it just seemed to not click with us for a number of reasons. I think it's a very beautiful game, and I enjoyed looking at the world while I played, but it didn't quite grab me from a gameplay or a mechanics standpoint. And I think sort of the Switch dream, right, of every game being on Switch and that enhancing it, it holds up obviously for new titles and still for certain ports, but the more time passes, the more I do feel like new games and new experiences is where I want my time and my money to be spent. And so when we look at titles like Bayonetta, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, these are fantastic games, but I don't really want to play them again, and even having them be on Switch didn't get me past a few hours with each of them.
Yeah, as far as the ports, that's how it would go with me. If I played a sizable amount on it on whatever platform it was previously, I didn't spend more than a couple hours. Wolfenstein jumps out for that as well for me, where, that's available much cheaper and it can run better on other places. And, it's, really cool on Switch, and they did a very admirable job with the port over there at Panic Button. But I think it definitely kind of fell by the wayside just because, hey, it's been available and it's not as cool as something brand new like the way you mentioned with Celeste.
Yeah, so if we look beyond Kirby Star Allies, Labo is something that was a curveball that none of us could have predicted nor expected. And Labo continues to throw balls. I don't know if it's a curve anymore, but the vehicle pack releasing in September, it's going to continue this cardboard craze. It wasn't much of a craze for us, and yes, it wasn't targeted at us. And I guess in some ways you could say neither was Kirby Star Allies, so maybe that begins to be a bit of the narrative of the first half of 2018, that it was just not really that for us, right? The ports we'd already played, and a lot of the other titles were things that were not, we weren't the demographic. But Labo, something that I had high hopes, could be an interesting time sink, and it was for the first few hours, but I'll be honest, I have not touched the cardboard nor the cartridge since.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? That was never made for us. Even, Kimishima had said, this year is about bringing in new players, and they kind of all but said, hey, we're going to do things for like the family this year, and that makes sense. Of course, we have some very cool stuff coming later in the year, but I have to agree, I haven't touched Labo since then. It's in my closet somewhere. I had the variety pack. I played with my cat for a little bit. We had fun making the videos. I don't want to diminish the quality of these things, because they're still very fun experiences, but like you said, just not for us.
Yes. From there, let's talk a little bit about Mario Tennis Aces, because that is one that I think did, in spite of some of its balance issues and in spite of some of the concerns with the single player and a few of the aspects of the online, it was the biggest time sink probably for both of us on Switch in the first half of the year. And so I do want to give that one a definite thumbs up. It may not be the perfect Mario Sports game, but I think it definitely was well worth the price and well worth the hype for us, because we did dive a lot of hours, a lot of intense matches, and frankly a lot of fun out of that one.
Yeah, I played close to 50 hours of that game. So yeah, that one for me was probably my favorite first party release of the year. Of course, we have things like Sushi Striker that were really cool as well, and Bayonetta, Donkey Kong. We've mentioned all of these, but Mario Tennis was a very fun time for me, and it continues to be. Every month we're gonna get a new DLC character for the foreseeable future, and I'm sure I'll jump back in to try those out as those get released. Hopefully, you have to do more than play one online match to get them next time. I really hope that's something that changes, but yeah, to me that's probably my favorite game of the year as far as what Nintendo did so far.
Yes. Notables from other game makers, things such as South Park Fractured But Whole, Payday 2, Limbo and Inside, Fallout Shelter, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, Wolfenstein 2. Across the board, for the most part, these are solid titles. Some of them, not as great as others for sure, but we have played almost all of these before. And while we did give them a try on Switch, and while for most of them we did have fun with them on Switch, I'll call out Wolfenstein 2 as a specific example of a game that was fantastic on the handheld and even maybe added something with the motion control option. Man, they just, in hindsight, they kind of fall a little flat because they were retreads.
Yeah, I mean, I know that for me, going forward, I'm going to be less excited for games like that. Dark Souls, right? Something everybody wants on Switch, and yeah, I want it on there too, but I wonder how much time I'm going to put into Dark Souls, because I've played that game multiple times now in its previous iteration, as well as the definitive edition being released on other platforms, including PC, where I already own it. So, that still not coming is probably going to be the first one where my expectations are a little bit more tempered, just because I know that I'm not going to, throw another 30 to 40 hours into the game because I've already done it elsewhere, and playing it on the Switch alone isn't going to be reason enough for me to sink that much time into it. So yeah, going forward, this first half of the year is going to have like an effect on me and what I expect from things. Yeah.
So quality-wise, if you look at the games just straight up, right, it's still there. And so I don't think it was a bad first half. I don't think it was like a mismanaged release schedule or anything of that sort. I think for us personally and for gamers who have been very active in the Nintendo space and in other platform spaces over the past couple of years, it begins to feel a bit bland. And I think we are learning that whatever special sauce the Switch had early on that made every title, whether it was 10 years old or brand new, an exciting experience, it's kind of wearing off. I've kind of grown accustomed to that flavor, and it doesn't hold its allure anymore. And I think, like you said, something like Dark Souls that I initially was so pumped for, maybe not. Maybe I will hold off on that one, and maybe I'll just wait for these new experiences. Because again, if I go back to my favorite titles on Switch from the first half, it's Celeste, it's Mario Tennis Aces. Shout out to Mega Man for somehow still bringing the heat, even though it's been, a game I've played over and over again. But I think that is more of a unique example, given that it kind of represents almost a virtual console-esque aspect to the Switch, something that we've wanted forever. And those are games that are kind of evergreen titles in the same way that like a Super Mario World will always be fun to play.
Yeah, and now the other thing I wanted to touch on here, Zach, was the two big games right now for me on Nintendo Switch multiplayer-wise. Fortnite and Paladins, both free-to-play experiences, both pretty awesome in their own right. Obviously, Fortnite is the biggest game in the world right now. That doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime soon. They continue to cultivate that over there, and it's fantastic that it's on Switch, but, I've seen people complain a little bit that, like, hey, there's, like, no building on Switch. People don't build on Switch whatsoever. I got a solo win on Switch just the other day while I was playing, and people are right. People don't build on Switch, but I did want to just go ahead and give them kudos for that, for having these experiences that crossplay in these aspects as well. You can play with friends on other platforms. That's pretty good. So again, I think neither one of us is like complaining about it, right? Like, we don't think that these games were like bad or anything like that. It's just like you said, maybe it's wearing off a little bit that these games are coming to Switch when they've been available in other places, and a lot of them just were not catered to us. But Fortnite and Paladins is something I did want to give a shout out to, because I'm still having fun with those.
It does feel like the first half of the year was very much a specific plan to expand the user base, expand the genre coverage, and lay foundation going forward. So I think including things like Fortnite and Paladins, sets up very nicely for that online service dropping in September, and it sets up nicely for the Switch to sort of be more of a multiplayer machine from an online standpoint, as well as a couch co-op and couch competitive machine. And then, lacing in a lot of these ports and sort of filling in some of not only the calendar gap, but genre gaps, things like Bayonetta, and, getting games like Fallout Shelter on there, putting in the Wolfenstein 2. It does help to make the system seem like a more fully fleshed out machine and also library. And I think that bodes well for them going into the holiday season. And, you could argue, I guess, a little bit about Pokemon Let's Go even being kind of a pseudo port of sorts, and we don't know the full extent of Smash Bros. Ultimate's content, but it begins to feel like this year is more about that, right? Is more about expanding and sort of spreading the tendrils to attract a larger audience, whereas maybe next year does hit with more brand new experiences, and hopefully, led by things like Fire Emblem, Metroid Prime, and more that can really sort of drive the new feel that we've been looking for.
Yeah, and I think they'll do that. I think next year's still going to be very exciting, and the fall is still very exciting in its own right. So I'm not worried.
Indie games also have played a big role this year. There seems to almost constantly be something cool and exciting, and obviously highlights like Hollow Knight and Celeste, really fantastic experiences. They added the other SteamWorld games earlier this year, and there's some little ones, whether they were brand new titles or brought over, things like Little Nightmares, Gabe, I know you loved, and that's definitely one of my favorite indie titles, and people are very much enjoying Limbo and Inside on the system as well. We have Dead Cells, Iconoclast, Salt and Sanctuary, a lot to look forward to there. So they've definitely kept that up, and it was interesting to look back and see that not many of these games I feel will really carry beyond their initial release window, save for, at least for me, Mario Tennis Aces is something that I can't see myself playing more of. But yeah, most of them just kind of came and went and did not have nearly the impact as some year one games in the likes of Splatoon 2, obviously Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Mario plus Rabbids. It feels a little bit more of a fleeting and less memorable year thus far. That could all change in a flash if Mario Party, Pokemon Let's Go, and Smash deliver. That trio could completely reset the whole year picture. First half, though, a bit on the less exciting side. But let us know how you feel about the first half of 2018 in hindsight. How did that lineup work out for you? And did the games you were hyped for live up to expectations, or were you, in retrospect, a bit bummed by the lineup? Let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to hear it. And make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest and greatest from the Switch and the rest of this year's release calendar. We've got you covered. Until then, though, for myself and Gabe, thanks again. Have a fantastic day. Switch Force out.